Hello and welcome to the Knock On, KCLR and Scoreline.ie's rugby podcast. And joined as I am every week by former Leinster captain Chris Pim. Chris, how are you?
Good, yeah. Excellent. Couldn't be better. Beautiful day.
Absolutely. It's lovely out there. We're talking exclusively today, Chris, on the podcast about the Lions squad selection for 2021. It's been made in the past hour. I'm going to take listeners through it at the moment. We had our predictions ahead of it. But just to let everyone know that Adam Wynne-Jones was named as the couture for the captain as well. Not really a surprise there, I suppose. But we'll talk about all that in a second. I'm just going to take it through the team now. So there's 16 backs named. They were Josh Adams from Wales, Bondi Yaki from Connacht, Dan Biggar, Elliot Daly, Gareth Davies, Owen Farrell, Chris Harris, Robbie Henshaw, Stuart Hogg, Conor Murray, Ali Price, Louis Rees-Zammit, Finn Russell, Duhan van der Merwe, Anthony Watson and Liam Williams, and 21 forwards of Tadhg Byrne, Jack Conan, Luke Cowan-Dickey, Tom Curry, Xander Fagerson, Talupe Faletau, Tadhg Furlong, Jamie George, Ian Henderson, Johnny Hill, and Maro Itoje. Alan Wynne-Jones, of course, he is the captain. Wynne Jones, Courtney Laws, Ken Owens, Andrew Porter, Sam Simmons, Rory Sutherland, Justin Tipperick, Maka Vunipola, and Hamish Watson. That is a big squad. It's a 37-man squad, Chris, which is one more than they were going to bring. I was watching the live stream earlier, and Warren Gatlin was saying that they felt they needed to bring that extra player, so they got permission to do it, just the way things balanced out. But in general, Chris, what's your overall reaction, I suppose?
Yeah, I suppose it was a lot of it was along predictable lines. There's obviously one or two surprises in there, which you'll get with every Lions tour. But I think overall it's a good squad. I suppose the makeup is quite interesting in that I'm only looking at the back row there. There are actually quite a lot of small men, if that makes any sense in this day and age. And so they're clearly looking at running around them as through them, certainly up front. But I suppose to counter that, then they've picked a surprise, which is probably the biggest surprise in the whole party, was Bondi Yaki, because I think everybody kind of had almost forgotten about him. So, but he'll certainly bring, he's there for his physical presence and his ability to run in straight lines and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what they've done there, because I suppose you'd have to say Bondi Yaki and Rob Henshaw are both really our 12s, but they're both very different styles of 12. So it'll be interesting to see how that one pans out. But I think overall it's a good side, a good squad. I suppose from my own perspective, I had Johnny Sexton in the squad, but then that would involve leaving Owen Farrell at home, and I suppose that was really one of the big decisions that's been made from the overall dynamic of the squad. But yeah, look, I think overall, say most of it is along predictable lines.
Does it fill you with confidence going into the tour, Chris? South Africa haven't played competitive rugby since the World Cup, which is quite a stretch. But they feel that's not going to be an issue. They'll get straight back into it. It's also an honour for them to be named on a South African team, Springboks team, to play the Lions as well. So there's plenty of pride coming from the other side.
Oh yeah, no, that won't be an issue. I mean, as ever, going down to Africa is all about physical presence. They will look to beat us up, and we're just going to have to play smarter and be more intelligent when we have the ball. Maybe not kick away as much ball as we have in the past, but then, I say we have to go around them instead of through them, because they're big men, and that's always been their go-to. But so it'll definitely be really, really interesting to see what way it goes. And to be honest, we could pick a first 15 today, but it'll be a million miles away from what will actually appear in the first test as well. So it's exciting, and to be honest, I'm just delighted it's going ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, just to let people know as well, you've been there. You were at the South African Lions tour. You've been in the middle of those places with that atmosphere and the build-up and everything else. It's quite something.
Quite something. Now, obviously, this year there won't be the crowd, which is a huge part of the buzz as well. But look, the whole the physical aspect of the game out there is definitely to another level, and I think that's something we'll see as well next year with the South African teams coming into the Pro 14. That level of physicality definitely makes a difference and does change the dynamic of the game. So it will be really interesting to see how obviously this touring team adapts to that, but also as I say, looking forward to next year with the South Africans coming on board here. Well, I think it will certainly make a contribution to the game here as well.
It's an unenviable task of trying to put together a squad with that much pressure on you as well, to try and get the right balance, the right number of players. Obviously, they felt they needed an extra head, even though they have 30 odd. It's a tough sort of thankless job, Chris, isn't it? You're never going to get the balance
absolutely
right.
Yeah, look, and I mean, I think the split is 11 English, 8 Irish, 8 Scots, and 10 Welsh, which, that's all very democratic, and looks like it was all, it was a bit of negotiating going on there that sometimes doesn't over necessarily work towards the best overall squad. But yeah, look, I think Ireland, I suppose, given that they don't have anyone on the coaching panel, probably did well to get 8 there, to be quite honest. So, and I suppose probably the biggest, probably 2 surprises in there, that Porter and Conan both made it. Now, I obviously had Porter in my squad, but Jack Conan, I think, has done well to get in there, given that, there's a couple of good players left behind. So, but yeah, look, it'll be really interesting to see how that pans out.
Yep. And let's look at the lads that are in. We'll talk about the lads that are out now in a second, or out or didn't make it because they weren't in the first place. So Conor Murray, we spoke about this last week in our little mini preview of the preview. Conor Murray is there on merit, of course, experience and everything as well, but just there's a huge lack of scrum halves and decent scrum halves to be considered for the Lions tour as well. And then you had one of the youngs pulling out during the week as well. Yeah. I think he was going to be brought by the looks of it, and was asked by Warren Gatland and declined. So Conor Murray definitely there on merit anyway.
Yeah, definitely there on merit. And as you say, Ben Youngs decided not to travel. Actually didn't travel the last time either. So maybe it's just a Lions thing, but he I think he's a bit of a strange fish off the pitch as well. So I think, the 3 that would travel, Gareth Davies, Ali Price and Conor would definitely look to be in pole position there in the short term. So but yeah, look, these things obviously change as a tour moves along. So be interesting to see how that goes, to be honest.
Yep.
But yeah, Conor certainly there on merit, that's for sure.
Robbie Henshaw's had a great season. He's been pretty solid for Ireland and Leinster. So no surprise there. And Bondi Yaki gets in as well. And they're going to be up against the likes of Elliot Daly. Chris Harris from Scotland is in there as well. I think he's playing for Gloucester at the moment. So there's quite a lot of, competition for places in there as well. But you wouldn't be surprised to see Robbie starting tests.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't be surprised. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised to see Owen Farrell playing in the centre either. It really depends on, the style of game they're looking to play. But, I could still see, if there's another injury in that back line, I could still see Johnny getting called out if he gets through the next couple of weeks. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. But, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. And no disrespect to Chris Harris, but I can't see him getting near test side at this stage. So that kind of narrows it down a little bit. And as I say, Robbie and Bondi Yaki both have been playing kind of 12, to be honest. So it really only leaves Elliot Daly there as a genuine out and out 13. And he's played a huge amount of his rugby in the last 2 or 3 years at fullback. So that centre mix they have in the centre there is interesting, And as I say, it would leave him a little bit light in the ground if there was an injury or so. So it would be interesting to see what they do there. But I suppose you could look at Anthony Watson's played a good bit of rugby in the centre as well, so they probably do have options there. But yeah, interesting to see. And I suppose Gary Ringrose will be a little bit sore this morning, but I think we've discussed it a couple of times on the podcast that he hasn't really flourished this year. But we were kind of hoping to get the trip that it might have been the sort of place that he would have started to flourish and could have become the superstar that we all thought he could be. But look, as I say, he's definitely on a reserve list, and bar an injury or two, if with an injury or two, I'd imagine he might still find himself in South Africa.
Yeah, they're jumping up and down the streets of Galway this morning at, say, Bondi Yaki in there. That's great for Connacht, great for Bundy as well. There was a bit of talk online before the podcast that probably bringing him for physicality and everything, but I sort of tend to agree with you, Chris. They're probably going to try and go over and around South Africa as opposed to through them. But Bundy, though, is one of those players, though, as well, with ball in hand. He can be quite dangerous as well, especially around the tight parts as well, breaking through tackles and getting himself around the park as well. But we'll have to see how it goes. Interesting that you're talking about Owen Farrell. Owen is listed as a fly half on the official list as well. But interesting chat there about the centres and the balance of that as well, the lack of out-and-out 13s bar one.
Definitely. And I mean, Henry Slade considered himself very unlucky there. I had him nailed on.
You did?
So I'm very surprised. He would have thought he was the best back on display for England this season. And as I say, hasn't made it. So, look, I'd be very sore if I was Henry Slade, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Tyke Furlong and Andrew Porter. Tyke expected, what a year, coming back from injury into the Irish team, flying through for Leinster, and he's heading to South Africa. Happy days.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think we discussed it as well. I kind of had Porter in there. He was on my squad, and I think delighted to see him there, and I think he's the kind of guy as well who absolutely flourished on a tour like that. I think it'd be a fantastic opportunity for him, and I suppose he does give the fact that he can cover at loose head if in an emergency. So that probably didn't do him any harm either. So look, delighted to see him. As big fill up for old Wesley, and played many years with his dad. So delighted to see Andrew getting the nod there. Fantastic.
And they're from around the Clonegall part of Carlow, apparently.
That's right, Carlow. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So for Carlow as well.
Yeah, can we claim Andrew as a Clonegall man, can we?
Oh, definitely.
No surprise with Tyke Byrne being named there. Obviously, back row and second row cover. And, just has since with the Six Nations this year, has really stepped up to it. Has been really solid for Munster as well. So no complaints there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's been superb. He's actually named as the second row, but
I see that in the list. Yeah,
I'd be very surprised if they play him in the row, particularly against the South African side, where he just lacks that little bit of physicality to be a top class second row. But I'd imagine we'll see him at 6. But look, these things all find their own level, but. I think Johnny Hill considered himself a little bit lucky to get in there. Now, I know James Ryan's probably the one that's lost out, but he hasn't really had a great season since Christmas, and he missed a couple of games through head knocks and stuff. So, but James Ryan will obviously be a bit upset that he would have been this time last year. We'd have been talking about him as a potential captain of the Lions, never mind travelling. So, so he's had a fairly serious fall from grace in the last year or so. But look, hopefully he can rebuild, and as you say, it's going to be a long 9 weeks or whatever it is. So a lot can happen between now and then.
You had Ian Henderson on your list. I didn't. Nice call there, Chris.
Well, I think again he's there with his leadership. He stepped up a good bit with Ireland this year, and I think his kind of leadership qualities and stuff have definitely come to the fore. He's been captaining Ulster for a while now, but I think, he was very much in a leadership role within the Irish setup. And while Johnny was captain, I think Ian Henderson was very much his second in command. So Yeah, look, delighted to see him make the tour. And again, he's probably in there as a dirt tracker. Hard to see him as a starting test second row, but yeah, look, who knows? There's always one or two bolters come out of a tour like this, and you'll definitely be somebody to be pushing for a spot in the test. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And Jack Conan was a bit of a surprise. I hadn't picked him anyway. Obviously, he was floating around in the back of our heads. I think we touched on his name last week as a possible, the same as we did with Josh van der Fleer and a couple of those boys. But fair play to him. He's in. He's pretty solid as well. Not most consistent of runs in terms of games and everything, but definitely worthy of bringing.
One of the things we said about him last week was that he hadn't a huge bank of rugby behind him, and that probably might stand to him coming in, that he's actually coming into the tour very fresh. And I think as well, when I was putting my team before I sent it off last night, I was looking and I didn't have him in it, but I was thinking there's very few out and out genuine eights there. You've only got Toby Faletau, and outside of that was like, oh really, I possibly should be looking at putting Jack in here. Now I didn't in the end, but I think he's probably there as probably the only genuine backup 8 to Faletau, whereas Tipperick, Watson, Curry and Simmons would be, well, Simmons can play 8 as well, but they're no real out and out ball carrying 8, so I think that will stand to him, and I think he might be a bit of a bolter for the tour as well, so it'll be really interesting to see whether he can step up, because I think South Africa might just suit him,
Absolutely. So let's look at the didn't make it. James Ryan, of course, and Johnny Sexton we've already touched on. Just injuries, whatever else it is. James Ryan, obviously, surprise. Ronan Kelleher. He's a surprise for me.
That was going to be a tough one. They were going to bring Cowan, Dickey and Owens. That was kind of nailed on. I think the third spot, Jamie George, given his history, he was starting line on the last tour. That probably stood to him. He hasn't had a great season this year. His excuse might be he's part of the Saracens set up and they haven't had a huge amount of rugby, and maybe that's counted against him. So, but he's there now, and it would be really interesting to see if he can get back in ahead of Cowan Dickey for the test, because he's clearly a fine player, but just hasn't been firing this year. But certainly, and I think probably stood to him as well, just his bit of physical presence, whereas Cowan Dickey and Owens are both smaller men and would actually be smaller than Kelleher. So I think Kelleher would have been the big hooker going out there, and maybe they felt that just he might have been a bit raw, but certainly I would imagine he's next in line. So, but yeah, look, I say I had him in mind, but Jamie George got in ahead of me there, so no surprise, I suppose, really, given his pedigree.
Absolutely. Cian Healy, a bit of a surprise. He's been fairly solid. He's got experience. Strange one.
Sutherland's probably the one who got his spot. Wyn Jones is probably nailed on, given the season that Wales have had, and I'm not saying, but Xander Ferguson and Sutherland have both made it now. The Irish scrum was in absolutely no trouble against Scotland, from my memory, and I would have thought we had a clear edge that day. So I would have both our props ahead of their props, but they've both made the squad. So, but yeah, I suppose Porter's benefited from the fact that he has that little bit of a utility prop there, and I don't know how close Cian Healy would have been, but he didn't have a good game last weekend, which wouldn't have suited him or wouldn't have helped his cause. That I think if he had a big game last weekend against La Rochelle, that may have helped him, and I think possibly James Ryan would have been in the same boat, that if he was going to squeeze his way in, they needed to have a big game against La Rochelle, and they were both fairly quiet, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a bit surprised with Hugo Keenan being left out of the squad, but he was up against Wales' Liam Williams. He was up against Stuart Hogg. Stuart Hogg was always going to go. Liam Williams, of course, there on merit as well. It's just a balance, I think, of the backs in the squad as well.
Yeah, again, you're coming back to the Scottish connection there, and Van der Merwe, he's in my book bloody lucky to be there. Yeah, I don't think he got in the Leinster team. Never mind get on the Irish team. So, and he's going as a Lion on the basis of obviously Greg Townsend has had a big input there. But I mean, I think Van der Merwe and Chris Harris would be two fairly ordinary players, to be honest. But I might be a little bit biased.
Just a tad. And we're allowed to be. Peter O'Mahony, I'm not terribly surprised about. Probably a bit more surprised about our other Munster South African man being excluded as well. Standard, yeah, like he's had a solid season. It would have been a nice free trip home, all that sort of stuff.
I wouldn't have had him in there, and he didn't make it. So I don't think it's any particular surprise. I think what he brings to the party is fairly limited. Yes, he gives you hard yards, but you have Falatau do that. I think Conan does it as well, and he's just that little bit more dynamic. And say Curry and Simmons can both play 8. So, I think they really had a lot of options. And yeah, look, I don't think he'll be overly surprised, but I'm certainly not surprised not to see him there.
And of course, Gary Ringrose been left out. We already have touched on that as well, at the lack of 13s or out and out 13s in the squad as well. I
just have a sneaking feeling we might see him out there yet.
Yeah, that's it. Let's just remind people we should take it with a pinch of salt. We've seen the Lions tours where 4 or 5 players get injured during training.
Exactly.
And then the plane is starting to fill up with fellas following out as well. So keep Johnny Sexton in your minds, Gary Ringrose, and a couple of other players as well. You never know.
I think there was a poster somewhere. I can't remember, was it the last tour or the previous tour, where they took a promotional shot for 5. There was 5 players in the squad, and not one of them ended up traveling through injury and whatever different reasons. So you don't want to be in any of the press releases for advertising the tour between now and then, because it's like a death knell. So we'll just keep an eye on that one. But I think Keith Earls was actually in one of them, and I'm trying to think who the rest of them were, but of guys who got injured and didn't travel. But we keep an eye on that one. So it does happen.
It happened with an Aer Lingus plane as well. They got it wrapped with the Irish rugby stuff, and 3 of the players that ended up on it
really?
had started to be dropped nearly completely at that stage. It's just a timing thing, you pick your horses and back them, and then things take time, and it all goes on. So Chris, just going through your list here as well. I couldn't name it all out, but just in terms of, let's look through the different people. Where are you most surprised out of your own picks versus what was officially announced today? You're fairly spot on in the main.
I'm not really surprised. I mean, I'd 30 out of the 37 names, so I only named 36, obviously, but they're not huge surprises. I'm not surprised Jamie George got in ahead of Cian Kelleher, ahead of Ronan Kelleher. But I was just being a little bit patriotic there, probably. I am surprised Ringrose didn't make it. But then again, we've kind of spoken about why he was obviously in danger and under threat. And I think with a Scottish backs coach in there, he was going to get a couple of Scots in there, and he's done that. I think absolutely we touched on the fact that Hugo Keenan was unlucky, but again, I was struggling really to get him into my side, even when I was picking the squad. And obviously I had Sexton in there ahead of Farrell. They were 2 big characters. Whether bringing both of them on tour or not was going to be the question. And I think Owen Farrell has won that round, or at least won it for now. So it will be really interesting to see how Farrell adjusts to, based on current form, he's the 3rd choice 10. Somebody who's used to being a leader, it'll be really interesting to see how that all pans out. So, look, he's that was obviously a big call. And then outside of that, obviously I had Ryan in there and Johnny Hill. Possibly a little bit lucky. I'm not sure Johnny Hill's done a whole lot during the season to warrant getting in ahead of Ryan, but then you could say the same about James Ryan as well. So he possibly was a little bit unlucky. And I suppose the other one, which we haven't touched on yet, was obviously in the back row. I had Sam Underhill in my team.
So did I.
And he hasn't appeared anywhere. And I think it's probably right, given the season that's been in it, that you pick the guys who played. Now, you can make the same case for Sam Simmons, but I think picking two non-Six Nations back rowers in a Lions squad might just have been a little bit much to stomach for a couple of the other nations. So that may well have counted against Underhill. And you do have Curry, Tipperick and Watson, who all clearly deserve to go, who are out and out sevens. So, but again, don't be surprised in a month's time if you see Sam Underhill run out onto the pitch. So, you can't. I wouldn't say he was too far away.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I suppose the extended panel, then we'll call it.
Yeah.
There's so many different positions and anyone can get injured. We were talking about this a couple of seconds ago. Realistically, from the Irish players, who will get call-ups? I know this is probably a weird question because there's so many positions, I suppose, and things are different. Out halves wise, will Johnny Sexton get the nod if anything happens, the likes of Farrell, or if they lose a centre and they put Farrell into 12, or I don't know, they start switching stuff around?
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see. I would have thought, it's kind of hard to know because it really depends on what their leadership group is and how that's going to work. But if Johnny was on the tour, he would have been absolutely one of the leaders. He definitely would have been in that leadership group. But that would have been as your starting 10. You can't see Johnny being second fiddle to anybody. So he's probably, he may be, I know I started by saying it the other way, he may be less likely to call out on the basis that he's not going to be anybody's backup. He would be your leading and starting 10, whereas you've made a decision not to make him your starting 10, well then to bring him out afterwards as technically fourth choice, and then you slot him in as your leader. That's that's kind of counter. It doesn't seem, that seems counterintuitive. So he's probably less likely to travel on that basis. But then again, if an injury occurred, it would depend, I suppose, how early it appeared on the tour. So look, hard to know with that one. But I think somebody like Hugo Keenan can't have been very far away, and certainly he would give you that flexibility if he was flown out, that he can cover. He could probably cover 13, 14, 11 and 15.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he would give you that level of cover. So he's probably not too far away in the event of an injury.
Imagine they're told that ahead of time as well. Just keep your calendar free.
Yeah, I think he contacted 57 players or something and asked them to clear their calendar on the view. So if you're in that remaining 20, you are literally an injury away from a call up. So it'll be interesting to see. I suppose with COVID and everything, it'll be interesting to see how they manage that coming in and out of camp thing. So, but it'll be interesting to see if guys can all get jabbed and stuff before that as well. So that's probably be a question that's going to be asked somewhere along the line as well.
Yeah, and this year, I suppose, compared to any other year, Chris, you're not going to get a phone call on your family holiday in Greece.
Exactly.
To fly back to Ireland, grab your gear and head on to London or whatever it is. It'll be different. I suppose if you're a scrum half, Chris, floating around, and one of them gets injured, say Connor or whoever, it's very hard to pick spares for that.
No, it was. And a lot I saw on social media there during the week, there was a lot of talk about Cooney and whether he might just get a surprise call up. So look, he mightn't be a million miles away. So if you're a scrum half, I'd certainly have my bag packed and wouldn't be making any plans to go anywhere just in the short term. So it could be a bit of a bolter there, definitely, for sure. So And as I say, John Cooney mightn't be a million miles away.
Chris, you've been there and you spent your time out on that tour as well as a supporter and everything as well. Like, obviously it's not going to be the same crowds wise and everything. I know there's a couple of bits and pieces still up in the air about all that, but is it still going to be the spectacle we rugby people all know and love at the end of the day? We're still going to get sucked into it on the TV.
Yeah, look, we'll get sucked in onto TV, but I mean, I don't think anything anywhere in the world matches a Lions tour with the traveling support. And, you know, I mean, basically anywhere they go, they outnumber the crowd 5 to 6 to 7 to 1, because such is the numbers that one travel and two manage to get tickets to the game. So it is that spectacle is obviously going to be gone and will be difficult to match that. So but look, yeah, it'll still be great TV, I'm quite sure. And you know, we've seen loads of really good games this season without the crowd being there. So yeah, look, we'll work around that, and it's certainly as a supporter, it's a price worth paying if we can get these you know, these games to go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, we're looking forward to it, Chris. It's always a great spectacle every 4 years, and there's lots to still happen between now and then. Who knows? Johnny Sexton, Gary Ringrose could be flying out. We don't know what's going to happen. There's always injuries and stuff. You always have the heartache as well of the Jerry Flannerys of the world getting injured on the training paddock and having to board a plane 2 days later. That's going the opposite direction. It's heart-wrenching stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Chris, we're looking forward to it, and thanks a million for talking to us on the Knock On. That's our Lions selection chat. It was named the Lions Tour. 37 lads have been picked, one more than their usual number, I suppose, by Warren Gatland. And I suppose we're happy enough with the Irish guys that are on it as well, but lots to happen between now and when the tour starts as well. Chris Pim, thanks for talking to us.
Pleasure. Thanks, Stephen.